Hey, this is Brian with Square Foot Gardening for the Red River Valley, and I want to talk to you today about amending our garden soils. And I want to talk specifically about garden soils. I'm not going to get into potting mixes or raised bed mixes or things like that. I'm talking to you old traditional dirt farmers that want to grow a garden in a typical garden situation, a traditional garden. And there's a lot of people out there that are still doing things that way. And I just thought I would visit with us a little bit about that and give you some information on what are some of the best things that we can do to amend, especially a very high plasticity indexed clay soil like we have here in Zone 4 in the Red River Valley, which is the border of Minnesota and North Dakota. And so, as we look at working with these heavy clay soils, we want to try to understand that our goal is not to basically loosen that soil. Our goal is to build structure over several seasons. And I like to say, and I tell people all the time, that it generally takes about 7 years to amend an existing garden soil. And what do most people do? My wife, who's a realtor, will tell you most people move about every 7 years. So you'll never end up accomplishing your soil amendments. You're always going to be doing something more to them. But especially for these high plasticity indexed clay soils, which are very heavy, they're very nutrient laden. They're not bad. It's just difficult to sometimes to work with them. And so we're going to look at this high plasticity clay soil and talk about what are some of the best amendments that you can use to improve not only your soil structure, but your aggregation of the soil particles, drainage, aeration, which is beneficial for root structure and plant health, and then also our biological activity. If we don't have critters and bugs and worms and things like that moving throughout our soil, we're not going to have healthy soil to grow good plants in. And so we want to talk a little bit about that. One of the worst approaches that we can take when we start thinking about amending garden soils is coming in with the approach that I'm going to dilute it. You're not going to dilute a clay soil. You're not going to add sand to it and dilute that. I've heard people say in the past, well, add sand, add sand. Well, that's not going to dilute that clay. It's actually going to start being a little bit detrimental to it. Till it, keep tilling it, keep tilling it, keep tilling it. You'll bust that clay up eventually. No, you won't. The clay will find its way back together. It's going to bind to itself. So I say one of the first things that we want to not do not add sand unless you really understand and know what your soil structure is. So basically for garden soils, adding sand to a heavy clay is going to make things worse. Most people think, well, I'll just add some sand to that. You don't realize just how much sand you're going to have to add to that clay soil to correct that or to amend that. Okay? Most people just add a couple of shovelfuls of sand to a spot in the garden and they think, oh, this is going to work. This is going to dilute this down. It's going to loosen things up. It's going to, allow this clay to not be as sticky. That's just the exact opposite of what we're going to try to do. So if we don't add enough sand, we can create a dense, almost a concrete-like mix that's going to be almost impossible to work with. It takes a very high percentage of sand to actually change that texture and that structure of those clay soils. And it's usually impractical for us gardeners to find or incorporate that much sand. Now, if you're working in a container box or in an elevated garden that's not as large as a traditional garden space, yes, you can experiment with adding sand. But do remember, it's going to take a lot more than what you realize. And so for home gardens and even some of your larger raised bed gardens, let's talk more about what we can do that's going to be beneficial to that soil And we're going to talk about the amendments of organic matter and the addition of structure building practices instead of adding sand to that. And so some of those things that we're going to talk about are the additions of compost, leaves, mulch, your grass clippings, things like that. And then even the use of cover crops towards the ends of the season. Those are some things that we can do that are going to things that we can do that are going to be much more better to amend our clay soils than the addition of sand. All right, let's talk a little bit about some of the best amendments for this high plasticity clays. Number one, compost, organic material. Like I said, that's one of the key components that we're going to need to amend an existing hard, thick plastic, high plasticity clay. And so it's really the all-around best amendment that we can add. Compost really helps clay particles form larger aggregates. Remember, we said don't add sand. That's not going to work. But when we add compost to that, it binds to some of the clay particles and it separates the clay into separate, distinct particles or aggregates. And so the clay compost will help clay develop and form those aggregates, which the formation of those larger aggregates are going to improve the pore spaces, which is going to allow for more aeration and permeability for water movement, drainage, and then also, again, our root growth. We've got to have pores and voids for our plant's roots to grow through and to develop that healthy structure. When you look at a plant, we all think, oh, that we've got the beautiful plant above ground, and the roots seldom extend past the drip line of the leaves. I don't believe that's true. Our root systems, because they are so small and minute, those root structures actually probably double or triple the diameter of the drip area of the leaves that they have. And so we want to make sure that we maintain those structures so those really, really fine root hairs can work their way through that soil structure. So when we talk about adding compost to the garden, what I usually like to tell people is add 1 or 2 inches every year on an established garden. 1 to 2 inches of a good, nicely composted material. I get my composts. I make a lot of my own compost. If you need to purchase composts, I try to guide people into gathering compost from different areas. One of the things when it comes to compost, people will say, well, what about my city? They pick up grass clippings and things like that, and they compost at the city site, and I can go there and I can pick up a load of compost for free. Is that good compost? Well, is it? I don't know. I've had people say, the city compost, if you look at that, who are the people that are putting their grass clippings out to the curb to have them picked up by the city, to have them hauled away and taken to the compost center? Most of those people are folks that are very particular about their lawns and how they look. And so you're probably going to see these folks are using a little bit higher degree of synthetic fertilizers, synthetic pesticides, grass, weed killers, things like that. And do those chemicals decompose, or are they removed or neutralized through the composting process? I don't know. I don't know for sure. There may be an opportunity that we may be introducing something into our garden that is going to be detrimental for the healthy growth of our garden. Some of these chemicals that are used have carryover, and so it may be we're actually adding herbicides to our garden soil, and that's going to hinder the growth of our good healthy crops. So be careful about what you're using for compost. You can make your own compost. That's simple enough, and I'm not going to get into that in this, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So I said 1 to 2 inches of compost added to your bed each year on an established bed. If you're getting into a brand new garden, I'd recommend adding 2 to 4 inches of compost to the top of that. And then go ahead and mix that top 4 to 8 inches into the existing soil. Or, you know what? Instead of trying to dig down and improve the existing soil that's underneath it, start with your compost on top and let the worms and the weather work it in itself. A couple of seasons, you're going to notice that's going to change. So go ahead and add that to the tops of your garden beds. Like I said, 1 to 2 inches a year on an established bed, 2 to 4 inches per year on a new bed. Get that started. Go ahead and mix those top few inches together so that you've got a nice seed bed to work with. Some of the best types of compost that, like I said, I deal with, some of my yard waste compost, getting up my leaves in the fall of the year, my grass clippings in the spring and summer of the year, looking at screening your compost, if you're adding woody materials and things like that to it. Go ahead and screen that compost out so you don't have those large articles in that material that are going to make it a little more difficult to work that soil and get your garden planted. And then also make sure that if you're using any type of manures, animal manures, that it's well composted. That it, if it smells like, crap, it probably, we're gonna know that it's crap. That's probably a really good indication that it is not aged. It has not reached its full composted ability. And so that can sometimes be detrimental to your garden crops too, because it's going to be too high or too hot in certain nutrient bases, and that could be detrimental for your garden. So also, when we add manures, animal manures to our gardens, we can increase our salt content and even sometimes our phosphorus contents because of the composition of the manure that we're using. So, compost, number one, a couple inches every year, throw it on the top, work it in so that you got a nice seed bed. Leaf mold, shredded leaves, those work great also. This is probably one of the best long-term amendments that I know of for heavy clays. And leaf molds, leaf scraps, shredded leaves, things like that, it improves our softness of our soil. It can help improve our moisture balance within the soil itself. You're going to see an increase in worm activity. Worms like those that moisture, that softness. There's a lot of material in there that they can utilize and feed themselves with. It also helps to improve the crusting that we get on the surface, because it is more of a sponge and it holds water and releases water nicely. It also improves our workability of our garden soils. And who doesn't like a nice loamy feel to the garden soil that you're planting into? What I recommend as far as using on leaf mold and shredded leaves, usually about 1 to 2 inches as a surface mulch. Now, that's one of the nice things you can do. If we don't leave our soils exposed, if we keep them covered up, the less likely that the sun and the atmosphere is going to leach away some of those nutrient contents that we want to keep there. After we put a couple inches under, lightly mix it into the top couple inches of the soil. Add the shredded leaves in the fall. Let them break down over winter. The winter freeze-thaw cycles is Mother Nature's grinder. It grinds those particles apart and it deconstructs them and breaks them down so that they become more beneficial in the garden soil. And we know our clays will get if we got clay clumps in the summer from maybe tilling too early in the year in a wet season, those clay clumps don't go away until the next spring. And so it takes those freeze-thaw cycles, that expansion and contraction of the soil particles and the moisture within those soil particle pores to have that breakdown and move those materials into something that's a little bit more familiar to a garden soil that we want to use. So those leaf molds, 1 to 3 inches a year, mix it in. Add those shredded leaves again, like I said, in the fall. Let them break down over the winter. Really, for our Red River Valley heavy clay that we've got here, shredded leaves are probably one of the more extremely practical methods that we can use for soil amendment because they're cheap, they're local, and they're gentle. They're not harsh. So we can pick up a lot of leaves. Even if you don't have trees in your yard in the Fargo-Moorhead area, believe me, in the fall when the wind blows, you're going to get some leaves. Somebody's going to donate them to you. They're going to wind up in your yard. So utilize them in your gardens. Mulch. What about mulch? Mulch can be just as important as what you mix into the soil. Heavy clays get worse when it's exposed to pounding rains, the baking of the sun, repeated wet-dry cycles. Mulch protects the surface of the garden from crusting over. Those types of things are very useful for that. So some good mulch options that we can look at for our gardens: shredded leaves again, some straw. Be careful with straw. You may be introducing some wheat or some weeds into that. Grass clippings in thin layers is a good mulch. Some of your compost is a good mulch material. And then partially decomposed wood chips in your pathways and maybe around your perennials. We'll talk a little bit more about wood chips as we go here, and we'll see a section devoted to wood chips and how we use those. But for mulches, again, about 2 to 4 inches on the surface of the garden. We want to go ahead and keep the mulch away from your plant stems so that those plant stems have the ability to have some air movement around them. The water is able to get away from them. It'll be much more beneficial to the plants if you not mulched right up around the stems tightly. Stay back a couple inches of diameter around those plant stems. They're going to be healthier and happier, and who doesn't want a healthy, happy plant in their garden? And so mulch especially, it's valuable because it does improve that clay. It helps from the top down without having to constantly till that material. And so the critters will come up from the bottom. They'll get into that mulch layer. That's good food for them. It also helps protect the soil from the degradation from the sunlight and the atmosphere, the leaching away of nutrients because of the rainwater, those types of things. Mulch is a good thing to use in your gardens. If you've got bare soil in there, it needs mulch on top of it. Hey, this is Brian. If you're enjoying this video, you're getting some educational, some entertainment, things like that out of this video, I'd really appreciate you liking and subscribing to my channel. I try to post on a regular basis. I try to maybe take a little bit deeper dive into some of these gardening questions that come up. I don't have all the answers, but I enjoy researching and reading about it and hearing from you folks. So leave comments too. I like to hear whatever everybody else is doing in the area also. Thanks. Keep watching. More to come. Let's talk a little bit about cover crops as a amendment for your soil. Cover crops are excellent because in those high plastic clays, because their roots are going to create the channels and feed that soil biology all at the same time. So some really good cover crops that you can consider for your garden. Think about things like cereal rye. Cereal rye has a very aggressive root structure. It's a great fall cover. It's going to serve you very well. Oats is another cover crop that you can utilize and look at. There's a winter kill option for that. It's easier for the gardeners when they don't have to completely mess with having to deal with mulching this up or grinding these things up working with those materials when at the end of the year, if we can have that winter kill, takes care of those oats, especially if they don't get real large. Generally, we don't plant cover crops until a little bit later in the summer, early part of the fall. We just want them to develop, put a small canopy to protect the ground cover over the winter months, and then have Mother Nature get in there with that grinding action from those freeze-thaw cycles to degrade that material that we had and put it into good organic material for our garden. Annual ryegrass is another great cover crop that you can utilize. Really has a strong root system, but we need to manage that ryegrass a little bit more carefully. Some daikons, or what we call tillage radishes, those are good because they're going to help open up that surface compaction because of the long root structures that those plants have. They can help incorporate pores and voids in the soil system, along with providing some of the green material on the top and cover. Also, clovers are good. Again, we're going to add a lot of nitrogen, and we're going to support the biology in the soil with something like clover. Again, something that you want to make sure that you're managing. Otherwise, it'll take over for you. Buckwheat is probably the one that I like to utilize the most. It's a fast cover. It canopies over, so it kind of controls some of our weeds in the late season. It's also very good for short windows. If you want to get something to grow and you want to mix in some green stuff, especially you folks that are maybe outside of our Zone 4 gardens, that buckwheat is really a quick fix to get some quick green material, green manure into your soil system. And so I like the use of buckwheat. It helps protect the soil, provides that cover to keep the weeds down, provides that green matter that is going to decompose and add nutrients to the soil. I also like the idea of using some sort of radishes in the fall. That again, it helps punch those holes in the ground and supports the biologicals in the upper portions of that soil. And so think about the use of cover crops when you're thinking about amending your soil. It's not an immediate, right away type of thing. It takes a little time, but doesn't it always? What about the use of gypsum? And gypsum is sometimes often recommended for clay, but it's not a magical cure, and we need to be careful a little bit with gypsum. It can help if the clay problem is related to a sodium issue or poor soil particle, what we call soil particle flocculation. It's really a lot more useful in those high sodium type clays rather than an ordinary heavy clay. Gypsum, I wouldn't use gypsum unless you've had a soil test that shows that you've got, number one, high sodium, a poor calcium to sodium balance, or a acidic or a dispersive soil type of behavior. That's the only times that I would use a gypsum. So for many of our northern clays, gypsum has a little bit of a limited benefit if sodium is not the problem. Now, if you've got a lot of alkali in your soils, if it turns white, there's an indication of of some high alkalinity in your soils, and gypsum may help in that. I would tend to think that in our smaller gardens, things like that, we can manage these issues with the addition of other types of materials rather than adding gypsum to the mix. What about some aged bark fines? Aged bark fines come from the outside of trees. It's not the wood. It's not the actual white portion of the tree, but it's actually the bark itself. And if they're aged and aged well, they can help improve structure in our raised beds and also in our garden mixes. We want to be careful with the use of some of these things, but making sure that we're using only good aged or composted bark. Fresh wood chips don't necessarily work the best for garden amending material. We'll talk about how that is. But for the aged or composted bark components, those are good in our raised bed gardens. That helps to improve the aeration of the soil, leaving it loose and friable so that we've got a good pore structure, drainage structure, aeration structure through there. It helps to promote long-lasting organic structures. And then it also reduces compaction in mixed soils. And compaction can be a real problem in our soils because, again, if we're working so hard to get this material light and friable and airy, and then we compact it, we're pushing those air voids back out, and we've compacted that soil, and we're kind of fighting ourselves the rest of our times in the garden if we keep walking on it or compacting that soil. But I would avoid using large amounts of fresh wood chips in vegetable beds because they have that ability to tie up nitrogen within the wood chips. And so if that nitrogen's tied up in your wood chips, it's not going to be available to the plants that we're hoping to utilize that nitrogen. And so I do put wood chips in my pathways in my gardens, but I do as that starts to creep in, I do rake those wood chips back into my pathways on a regular basis, and I never till or get in and rough up my soil in the spring of the year. I generally tilth. I don't till deep. I'll broad fork my garden and then just kind of heavily rake the top couple inches, but I do not introduce any wood chips. I make sure I rake those wood chips back into the pathways where they belong, and so that I try to eliminate losing some of that nitrogen to those wood chips. Biochar. Biochar can help with long-term soil structures. It can also assist in nutrient holding, but it needs to be charged first. And so understanding that, just knowing that we don't want to add raw biochar in any large amounts. It can hang on to some of our nutrients. So better if we mix our biochar with our compost, let it sit moist for a few weeks, and then lightly apply that. So don't put that into your general compost, but maybe make a special smaller portion of compost where you can put a little bit of biochar into that. Again, keep it moist for a couple of weeks, and then lightly apply that as kind of a side dressing to some of your gardens, some of your plants, things like that. But generally, I don't want to use more than about 5 to 10% volume of biochar or that biochar mix in my gardens. That blended biochar and compost, no more than about 5 to 10% of that material goes into my garden at any time. Or I just lightly sprinkle that blended compost throughout the garden throughout the year. Biochar is optional. There's things like compost, leaves, mulch, and cover crops. Those things are going to do a lot better job and are going to be a lot less finicky that we have to do anything special for. So biochars are not, directly applied biochars are not an answer. There's extra things that we need to do to utilize biochars, and we can talk about that in another video section later on. So what do I suggest as a really good strategy for amending those heavy clay soils in my garden beds? If I'm working in a new in-ground garden bed, again, I'm not talking necessarily about container gardens or potting mixes or exclusively raised bed gardens, but in-ground gardens, traditional gardening situations. Here's my recommendations for working with and dealing with these heavy clay soils in our Zone 4 gardens in the Red River Valley of Minnesota and North Dakota. Number one, and this is probably the most important thing, and I see this happen to especially inexperienced gardeners. They haven't done it enough times to know that that's not good. We get in too early. We get the itch in the spring of the year. It's nice outside. I want to go do something. I'm going to go till the garden, and the garden's too wet. And so what happens when we till that garden, we create clay balls, large clods of clay. And those things are not going to break up over the summer. Once you have clay balls in your garden, they're going to be there all summer long. You can rake them out, but they're still going to be there. It's going to take those freeze-thaw cycles, Mother Nature's grinder, that action that she puts to work in the wintertime, the magic that she does to bust those clay balls back up. So that, and then if you wait the next year and wait until it's dry before you get in there to till, you're not going to have problems. They disappear that way. But if you till too early, you get clay balls, you're going to have them. Those clods are going to be in your garden all summer long. So don't work your soil too early, especially in the heavy clays. Make sure that when you get the opportunity, spread a couple of inches of compost across your garden beds. Okay, those in-ground gardens. Spread that across there. It's going to, and try to incorporate that into the top couple of inches of your garden soil. Don't deep till. There's no need to deep till. You're not going to, don't worry about the hard pan and things like that. If you feel that you want to try to bust your clay up, use a broad fork or a pitchfork, a digging fork. Just get down there, drive it in as far as you can, rock it back and forth, just to kind of loosen the soil. Don't turn it over. Don't double spade it. That was an old method my grandpa used to use all the time. He'd dig a trench and then dig another trench deeper and then put the dirt, rotate the dirt and the soil. Don't deep plow your gardens. Don't deep till your gardens. There really is no need. The only there's people that say there is not a single tillage practice that's beneficial to the soil. Tillage practices are incorporated to make the process of planting and crop production more user-friendly or easy. There's not a single tillage practice that's out there that's beneficial to the soil. When you deep till, when you deep spade, things like that, you're disturbing that soil structure that our biologicals, our worms, our bugs, our critters worked so hard to develop, and they create those channels and those pathways and those highways, if you want to call them that, all the way through our soil systems. And when we go in there and deep till or deep dig, we destroy all that. That eliminates our opportunities for drainage, our opportunities for aeration, nutrient uptake, things like that. So don't deep till. Don't dig too deeply. You only have to mess with the top couple of inches just so that you got a nice layer to work your soils, plant your seeds, and get your garden up and running. It's amazing what roots can do. They'll find their way through to where the moisture is. Don't worry about that. Add a couple of inches of leaf mold in the fall of the year. Those leaves got to go somewhere. Why not on your garden? Also, again, like I said, no more than the top couple of inches of the soil ever really needs to be worked, and it just helps to make it a little bit easier for getting your seeds started, things like that. Especially if you're using some sort of a planter like a jang planter or an earthway planter, you got to have a pretty smooth surface, even surface for those types of equipment to work the most efficiently as they possibly can. If you get an opportunity, develop even a slightly raised bed within your traditional garden. Identify your planting areas and identify walkways. There's no need to have a walkway between every row of plants, okay? Group your plants a little closer together. Most, they say market gardeners, if you want to use that term, 30-inch beds are kind of a standard. We use a 30-inch bed or a 12 to an 18-inch pathway, a 30-inch bed, a 12 to 18-inch pathway. So, kind of lay your garden out that way a little bit. Go through and rake that pathway soil back up on top of the 30-inch bed that you're going to plant. And eventually you'll get a little bit of a raised bed effect, and that'll be beneficial in your gardens. It'll help to deal with drainage, helps to warm the soil a little faster in the spring of the year. It eliminates you walking on your planting beds, that compaction issue, and then maintain those pathways consistently year after year after year after year. And pretty soon you're going to find that you've got a very nice, light, friable soil, some very nice pathways that are somewhat compacted, and so you're not fighting with the weeds as much using that. So mulch your surfaces. Make sure if your pathways, make sure you keep those covered. There's no reason to leave that soil exposed. Mulch around your plants as much as you can to protect that sunlight from taking, evaporating off your moisture, uptaking some of your nutrient complexes, and keeps those a good cover for our beneficial organics, organisms that are in the gardens. And then again, avoid walking on your beds. Keep your compaction to your pathways, and I think you'll find that will be much beneficial to you as you garden. So really looking at the shape of the gardens and things like that, a raised bed, even if we can raise it just a few inches above the rest of the ground, take that soil out of those pathways, put it on top of your beds. If we can get a couple inches differentiation between the pathways and the beds, you're going to find that it's going to warm up faster in the spring, it's going to drain better, and it's also going to reduce a lot of those problems that we have with root stress. Why? Because it's not compacted. So what do we do with our existing garden beds? And again, when we're working with that, we talked a little bit about the amendments that we're going to have for a new in-ground bed. Let's talk about those existing in-ground beds. Again, add an inch or so of compost every year as you're doing your spring work. Get that incorporated into the top couple inches. Again, don't deep till, don't deep dig your gardens if you don't need to. There's no real need to. Nothing grows in the wild. Mother Nature doesn't go out and till the garden so that it's going to be ready for the seeds to fall on it. And think about how things grow in nature. There's no tillage practices in nature when it comes to gardening. So add that inch of compost, work over the top couple inches of that to incorporate it. Using your shredded leaves, straw mulches work great. Keep your soil covered. If that soil is exposed to the environment, it's going to leach off some of its nutrients. It's going to lose some of its moisture. It doesn't going to provide good cover for our biologicals. So keep that soil covered with some sort of a mulch. Use cover crops when that bed is empty. Like I said, incorporating a little bit of buckwheat in there is a great way to get some green manure into your gardens. The roots help to bust open some of that clay structure. Avoid that deep tilling. I can't stress that enough. And avoid walking on your planting areas, your bed areas. That's why I say establish your garden more permanently than every year going out and tilling the entire thing and then stretching out string line and say, this is where I'm going to plant my corn and this is where the carrots go and everything like that. No, develop it into whatever's most comfortable for you. Most people say a 30-inch bed and a 12 to an 18-inch pathway, and just do that all the way through your garden. And then leave that established. That way you don't have to till the entire thing, or like I said, I don't really want you to till any deep tillage, but if you're going to shallow till your gardens, you only have to do part of it. We don't have to water the pathways. You don't need to fertilize the pathways if you're going to fertilize. We don't need to do anything with them. We just need to keep walking on them. and not walk on the beds. 30 inches is a kind of a standard. It's nice because you can reach to the center of that fairly easy from both sides, from each pathway. If you want to straddle your garden bed for planting and transplanting or harvesting, 30 inches isn't too bad to straddle. Most people can handle that. I would not go real wide. 48-inch beds, you're going to have trouble reaching to the centers of them if you've got to do any weeding or things like that. And again, you're not going to be able to straddle a 48-inch row. But make your garden rows, your beds as wide as you are comfortable with. Experiment with it. It's your garden. So avoid walking on those planted areas. It's not a quick method. You're not going to see your garden turn around in a year's time. It's going to take a couple of years, but when you start thinking about these different practices, over time you're going to see that this has been beneficial to your garden. So let's talk about amendments and what amendments we should use for what problems. So when we start talking about our clay soils, one of the things that we think about is that our clay gets sticky when it's wet. And so what can we do to eliminate that stickiness that makes your feet 10 times bigger than they should be when it's been raining out? Compost. I don't know if there's any garden problem with clay soil that we're going to amend without the use of compost. I think that organic material is the number one thing that, as soon as we start talking about amending our garden soils, you should be thinking about compost. Some other things are leaf molds, mulching, and then again, if we got sticky clay when it's wet, don't dig it. Don't dig it until it's dry. You gotta wait. If you go out in the garden, you grab a handful of that stuff and squeeze it together, and it holds that cast in your hand, it's too wet to be tilling. Okay. The hard clods when it's dry, other than waiting for Mother Nature to bring a winter on, which we don't always look forward to, that's what it's going to take to bust those up. You're not going to go out there and break them up by hand. You're not going to go out there and be able to re-till it and have them all break up. They're going to be there. But through the use of compost, through the use of shredded leaves, utilizing those cover crops, we're going to start to reduce the effect of those hard clay clods. Drainage in our gardens. If we've got poor drainage, most clays are not real permeable, so it doesn't allow that moisture or that water to flow through that soil. Poor drainage, we can correct a lot of that with that raised bed aspect. Again, our 30-inch rows, 12 to 18-inch pathways, rake that soil up on top, gets 2 to 4 inches of differentiation or height to that raised bed path. That can help improve your drainage. Again, compost. Compost is loose, it's light, and it's airy. It's got a lot of void spaces. It's going to make it easier for water to be able to flow through that. Surface mulching, that also can help with drainage issues, because that surface mulch is going to stop that rain from compacting and impacting with our soils, with those clays that are in those soils, causing that crusting, which is going to be more of a drainage issue and things like that. So that surface mulch diffuses the power or the impact of the raindrops as they're coming down. It allows that water to flow to the sides, especially on a raised bed situation, and it'll definitely help our drainage issues. And again, if you can avoid compaction, creating a hard surface, creating a densified soil material underneath that, if it's loose and friable and airy, the water is going to transport through that. If we compact it, it's going to eliminate the void spaces, and it's going to make it more difficult for water to flow through some of those things. What about poor root growth? I said a plant has got its tops to it, and people think that, well, all the root structure is within the drip line of the canopy of the plant. I believe that the canopy or the root lines are much larger than the canopies of the plant. And so if we have poor root growth, it's because the very, very fine roots that are being produced by that plant, they can't get through the material. They just can't make it through. There's not enough void space in the soil structure itself for those roots to be able to find a way to weave themselves through. And so when we think about that poor root growth, again, compost, it's going to maintain that lightness, that airiness, that void structure that we need. The use of cover crops, again, like I said, if we can put some radishes in, something like that, or even the buckwheat and the weed, or the roots from the buckwheat, they go down, they create voids, and if we leave them in there and leave those roots in there over the wintertime, those voids are going to remain. You don't have to go out and pull your plants out every fall, roots and all. Cut the tops off, let the roots decay. They're going to be there to feed the biologicals that are in the garden, and they're also going to provide and create those void structures that we need too. And so other things that we can do, broad fork that garden. We're not going to go in and deep till it because we're going to destroy all of the channels and the pathways and the highways that our biologicals have created. But if we broad fork, or we just go down and we rock the soil back, we're just loosening it up a little bit. We're not destroying those pathways. And so a broad forking procedure can be very beneficial for situations where we have poor root growth. Again, if we have low, sometimes we can have low oxygen around our roots. Plants can drown in wet soil because roots have to breathe also. And so we can utilize, again, our raised bed situation. We got improved drainage in raised beds. The use of composts. Again, that's going to keep our soil material much more friable, airy, full of void contents. And then avoid overwatering. Don't water until the water stands on the surface, but water it, walk away from it, come back and water it again a little bit later. Do it in sessions. Water across it, water the rest of the garden. Just use a quick sweeping motion if you're hand watering, or put your sprinkler out there for, say, 15 minutes. Allow that water to get on the ground, then shut it off. Allow that water to soak in to the soil, then go back on, turn it on for another 15 minutes, an hour later. And then again, it's going to allow that water to infiltrate that soil structure, get down deeper in there, and then it's also going to be able to not saturate the pore structures as much as we want. Again, avoid compacting that soil. Compacted soil just makes it more tough for the roots to work their way through, to develop right. It's going to cause drainage issues and things like that. So if we just eliminate walking on our beds, we can broad fork our beds. And again, the use of cover crops, that root structure and that green manure. What if we don't, biologicals? One of the quickest indicators of a healthy soil system is earthworms. If you go out in your garden and you're digging around and you're not finding any worms, your soil is missing something. We've either done something to not attract worms, or we've done something to make them want to go somewhere else where it's more hospitable to live. And so if we have situations like a low biology count, we're not seeing earthworms, we're not seeing the bugs in our gardens. Again, adding compost, adding our leaf mold, allowing roots to stay in there so that it's food available for those things. Mulching so that we don't dry our surfaces out. Those are all activities that we can do and processes that we can do to help improve the environment that those biologicals want to live in. If they've gone, they'll come back. If we, if you open up a new buffet, people are going to show up. But if you close the buffet, people are going to quit coming. So offer up a nice buffet for those biologics. So we're talking about bed preparation and things that we can do. And I mentioned the term broad forking. And broad forking is a very viable system that we can use to loosen clays without actually destroying that soil substructure that we have there. Again, broad forking is going to be a lot more beneficial than deep tilling or deep digging because it's not going to destroy or disturb that structure as we think it will. So I do like the idea of using a broad fork. Now you can purchase actual broad forks that are designed to be broad forks, or you can just use a potato fork or a digging pitchfork, something like that. Just jab it in the ground as far as you can and then rock that soil back and forth. You don't have to turn it over. You don't have to dig with it and turn it over, invert the soil. That's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to bust it up. But timing, when it comes to broad forking, our timing is important. Make sure that the soil is damp enough so that you can penetrate the fork into it. You know, if the ground is too dry, it's going to be hard to get that driven into the ground to do anything. Make sure that it's not too wet so that we're complicating things. If your fork is coming out with a lot of clay stuck to it, the garden's too wet. Those little clays that stick to that stuff, those are going to form into clay clods, and that's going to be problematic for you for the rest of the summer. Make sure that your soil is dry enough and damp enough so that if it's dry enough that when we hold it together, that it crumbles, it falls apart, it doesn't kind of smear. If you grab a sample of clay and you hold it in your hand, you shouldn't be able to smear it or make ribbons out of it. It should crumble and freely fall apart. That's where it's dry enough. And then making sure that it doesn't stick to your tools or your boots. If it does, it's too wet. Let it dry out. So in permanent beds and pathways, it's really a huge improvement for clay soils. We can make, like I said, consider making some permanent growing beds with permanent walkways, 30-inch bed, 18-inch, 12-inch walkways, and then never walk in that growing portion of those beds. That clay soil compacts really easily, and it's one of the reasons that we have drainage issues and root structure issues is because of, a lot of times it can be because of compaction. One season of foot traffic can really undo a couple of years of improvements that you've made on your garden structure and your soils. So eliminate compaction by establishing beds and establishing walkways. And again, I recommend that 30-inch bed and then a 12 to an 18-inch walkway. Raised beds, understanding the use of those raised beds can be very helpful as far as dealing with high plasticity clays. And the raised bed may be one of your best practical solutions that you have. You don't always need to have a tall box. It can just be mounded beds within your garden structure itself. And so if you think of some good options, if you can get a 12 or 6-inch raised bed, mounded beds in your gardens for vegetables, that works really well. If you're using some sort of a framing system, either a wood or whatever type of material you're using for your raised beds, 10 to 12-inch beds work well for managing raised bed gardens. And then make sure that you mulch your pathways with wood chips or straw or some sort of thing so that we can kind of have some weed control, some moisture control, and it also helps to encourage some of the biologicals to take up residence in our gardens where we want them. Some of the amendments that I want to talk about that maybe we need to avoid, and I brought this up at the very beginning of this video, is sand. Most people think that adding sand is going to dilute the clay. It's not. We can't add enough sand to our gardens to actually have that effect. You can do it in container gardens, small pots, things like that. Yes, that's possible. but the practicality of doing that in a large garden it just isn't feasible. So thinking that you're going to add sand to the garden to reduce the clay, it's not going to work. So don't add sand. Fresh wood chips mixed into your soil, again, that's good on your pathways. It's good around your, if you've got shrubs and things like that, that's great. But it's not ideal when we mix into our vegetable zones. Okay. Again, our those wood chips are going to take on some of our nitrogen, and it's going to make it not available or not accessible to our vegetable garden. Peat moss. Peat moss, it's and we talk about planting mixes and potting mixes, and I talk about Mel's mix, and we talk, that's one of the main components of Mel's mix is peat moss. But in a traditional in-ground gardening system, peat moss is available. It'll help with moisture. It'll help to increase some of the texture in potting mixes, but it's not my first choice for heavy clay soils. Peat moss is, to an extent, is a non-renewable resource. And when we think about the size of a garden compared to a container garden or a square foot garden, we can use some peat moss in those areas because we're not going to use very much of it, and we're only going to add it once. But when we think about in-ground gardens, traditional gardens, the amount of peat moss that we would have to add to that economically might not even be feasible. Peat moss is not an expensive amendment to add to our soils. And so if there's other things that we can use that are going to be just as good or maybe even better than the use of peat moss. And so your composts, your leaf molds, those types of things are going to be much more beneficial for your garden. Another thing to avoid is too much manure. Okay, if we have too much manure, it can add salts to our soil. It can increase our phosphorus. There can be, if it's not properly composted, manure can contain weed seeds and also herbicide residues. Those animals go out on pasture. They're eating sprayed forage material. They're being fed different things. Some animal manures are good. If you've got a source of good composted, well-aged, well-rotted manure, that's great. Like I said, if it smells like crap, it's still crap, and you really don't want crap on your gardens. I always remember the joke. My neighbor told me to put cow manure on my strawberries. I still prefer cream and sugar. Okay, so lime, another component that we want to be careful with. We don't add lime on a regular basis. Only add lime if you have a soil test that comes back with a pH that's too low. Okay, many clay soils that we have up in this portion of the country are already neutral, or we have more problems with alkalinity than we do with acidity in our soils. So be careful. Do not add the use of lime or gypsum unless you've got a soil test that comes back saying, yeah, that would be beneficial. Or say you want to grow hydrangeas or some sort of a flowering plant that requires a more acidic soil than your garden soils. Generally, our garden soils, they want to keep them a little bit on the acidic side. 7.2, 7.4 on a pH scale is usually not about where we're at here. If you want them slightly more acidic, getting them down into that 7, 6, 9 for those specialty types of plants and things like that, understand what you're trying to grow. So, and everything has its own best place it wants to live in. So the best simple recipe that I can provide you for heavy clay soil is that for every 100 square feet of garden bed, 100 square feet of garden bed, so 10 by 10, that'd be 100 square feet, 1 to 2 inches of compost. Okay? an inch of leaf mold or shredded leaves in the fall of the year, 2 to 4 inches of mulch on top of your soils to keep those soils covered. And then again, consider the use of a cover crop when those beds aren't being actively farmed or gardened. Repeat that yearly. Don't deep till, don't deep dig. Just incorporate into the top couple of inches of your soil so that you've got a good seed bed preparation area. It's not we're not going to turn clay into loam overnight. In fact, we never will. But our goal is to create a better top 4 to 6 inches of living saturated soil. We're not gonna fix everything, but if we build up, start at the ground and work our way up, we can improve our soils considerably. But we're not going to create a loam out of a clay soil. So some of my top recommendations for these high plasticity clays. Number one is the amendments that we're going to use. Add compost. Compost, compost, compost. Our shredded leaves, our leaf molds, those types of things. Grass clippings, mulches, cover crops, and keep your feet off the planting beds. Pathways, beds, pathway, beds. Look at that. That combination of working with your garden soils in a traditional gardening method are going to do more for you than any single bagged amendment. You're not going to go down to the local big box store and buy a all-in-one garden improvement. A couple of things, it's going to have issues itself. Number two, you probably can't afford it. Okay, you're not going to go out and take a couple 100 square foot garden and say, I'm going to go out and buy a bunch of pre-mixed potting soils and put into my garden and cure all my problems. Very cost prohibitive. So these things are available to us. We can access them readily. We can produce a lot of this stuff ourselves and utilize that. So let's think about what we can do to make the soil better and eliminate the things that make our soil worse. Hey, thanks for listening. I appreciate your opportunities, and leave some comments for me below. I love to hear from what other people are doing, what your thoughts are on this subject, and as always, keep those fingers dirty. This is Brian with Square Foot Gardening for the Red River Valley. Have a great day.